Hi, today I'm going to be talking to you about how to convert a RUCKUS SmartZone to a RUCKUS WAN gateway. So I was at a deploy and the customer was reporting that their wireless system was having some problems. So I took a look at the SmartZone, and as you can see in the screenshot down below, there were hard drive problems, which clearly indicated that the SmartZone hard drive was failing or something along those lines. So I talked to the people that I know at Ruckus, and one of them actually told me that what I should do is I should convert the SmartZone into an RWG, a Ruckus WAN gateway. And then on the hypervisor of the Ruckus WAN gateway, I should then install a virtual SmartZone, making me feel a little like Inception. Before we begin, I just want to say that by following the steps outlined in this video, you will be voiding any support and or warranty that you may have on the SmartZone hardware. Proceed at your own risk. Alright, so here I've got the Ruckus SmartZone 104 that has the broken hard drive. I do have some technical documentation that describes how to replace the hard drive in this thing with this SSD that I've got here. After we replace the hard drive, obviously, then we're going to need to flash this machine with the RWG software, but you can just do that with a USB, and that part's not too difficult. So now it's time to try to replace the hard drive in this thing. It's not too difficult when I read the instructions. I mean, obviously, first we got to take off this top cover that's right here to access the stuff underneath. In order to do that, we've got to get access to a bunch of screws and unscrew them. So on the side here, there are some screws. There's one right here, and there's also one right here. And on the other side, it's the same thing. And then on the back, we've got another two screws. So there's one right here and one right here. So I guess let's just start taking them off. Alright, so just a warning before we begin. The instruction manual says to use a Phillips head screwdriver because obviously the screws that are in this thing are Phillips head screws. But my problem is that these screws are so tiny that I could not find a Phillips head screwdriver that could fit into these. So in the end, I found literally the smallest flathead screwdriver I had, and we're just going to be using it. It works, and it's obviously going to be a little bit scuffed, but it's the best I could do because these screws are like literally so small. Alright, so as you can see here, I'm just starting with the two screws on the right hand side of the box, and then I just move to the back two screws, and then we finally get the final two screws on the left hand side. The screws can be a little bit tight, I will note, because for some reason some of them are definitely screwed in a lot tighter than the others. Alright, so as you probably saw, I had a little bit of trouble on that fifth screw there. It was really tight compared to the other ones. But I did manage to get all six screws off, so now it's time to take this thing apart and see what's inside. So, as you can see here, this is the inside of the SmartZone. So fancy. There's obviously this motherboard here. This is the UPS, I believe. And this here is the hard drive that we need to replace because it is kind of dead, as you probably know. There are three cables, I believe, that we need to deal with. There's this one here, this red one right here. There's this one that is multiple cables actually, and then coiled back together and taped, which is this black one right here. And then there's this third cable, this little small one right over here. I don't know if you can see it. It's this little green one that I'm pointing at. That is the grounding cable for this hard drive. So yeah, we need to pull this apart and obviously then put this guy right here in its place like that. Alright, so first we're going to begin by taking out these two cables right here. I'm pretty sure that this one right here is just as simple as you press this little metal bit right here, which is the clip, and then you can just pull it right out. Yep, there you go. You see, there's the first one. And then now we need to pull this one out. It seems like it's glued in by whatever this sealant is right here. I'm not so sure what's going on there, but I'm pretty sure I can just pull it out. Yeah, there you go. So as you can see, this sticky stuff, it's like a Play-Doh that's hardened or something. But this right here, once you take this out, now you've got the two cables here. And if we look at the SSD that I have, we've got those same two connectors, I'm pretty sure. So if you look right here, we've got this one, the small one, and then we've got the big one. And I'm pretty sure they actually fit just exactly back in kind of the way that this hard drive was. So next, then we're going to have to unscrew the hard drive. So as you can see, there's this cable over here. This cable, we're going to have to unscrew that, and then we'll be able to disconnect it. So, just going to go into this screw from this side. Let's see if I can loosen it. Ooh, this is a tight one. Ah, wow, this is tight. Okay. Um, I might have to disconnect this whole cable here in order to get at it because that is a very tight fit. However, it seems like this thing actually, oh no, it will budge. Let's see. Let's see if I can, there we go. All right. So with this out, that should make it a little easier to unscrew this grounding cable here. Let's see if I can get this to work. You can probably see here that I am struggling to turn it a little bit. It may take you a little while, but you'll probably get it eventually. And magic. All right, so I do actually have a magnetic screwdriver. So it was sticking there, but you just have to make sure you pick up the screw because we want to put that back in. Alright, so with that done, now I need to get the other three cables that are here. Sorry, screws, not cables. The other three screws. So, I don't know if you can see this bolt right here. That's another screw. There's another one over in there. And the last one is right here. And I do actually need to take off all three screws in order to be able to pull out this hard drive. However, the problem is that this screw is very inaccessible, as you can probably imagine, given that there is a giant chunk of metal right here. So what the instruction guide actually recommends is that we flip over the whole SZ and unscrew this hard drive mounting rack from the back, which I'm going to do now. So let's see what happens. Ooh, this is heavy. Okay. So you can probably see that here, and here, there are the four hard drive mounting bracket screws. So we're going to have to take those off. This is pretty boring. It's just another little montage of me unscrewing those hard drive mount screws. I just heard the hard drive drop to the bottom, obviously because we just unscrewed the whole mount. So I'm going to pick up the SZ, and I'm actually going to try to see if I can get that. Oh no, it's still attached. Just barely. Alright. So, hold on, let me move this back to this side. Alright. Alright, this whole mount is now loose, as you can imagine. Let's get these other three screws off, and then I can now replace the hard drive with the SSD. Alright, so I've gotten the four screws unscrewed. Oh, I didn't actually mean to make that funny joke. But these were definitely pretty tight. Obviously, it's going to be interesting to try to put the SSD back in, but as you can see, these four screw mounts are now gone. I can pull the HD out, and I guess we're going to just replace it with this beauty of an Intel SSD right here. Not sponsored, by the way. Alright, let's put this thing back together. I'm not sure if I can line up the holes exactly properly, though, because this SSD is definitely a little bit shorter than the hard drive was, but I'm assuming it'll be fine. Um, but yeah, let's just try to start putting this back together. Obviously, I'm gonna need to save one screw for the for this thing, for the grounding cable. All right, and with that, that is those three. I'm just looking at the hole right here, and it does appear that the hole is actually lined up with the screw, so we should be good to just screw this back in. All right, let's flip this bad boy back over so I can remount. Actually, I can't flip it back over because in order to mount this, I have to see what I'm doing. So I guess we're actually going to just do a little bit of wire management, stuff this right back here where it belongs. Alright. And alright. I think I see a path to victory. This is going to be a little bit tricky though, so I'm not sure how I'm going to do this. I'm probably going to flip this back up, and then we're going to then screw it in from the backside. So I'm going to flip this back up here. We're going to do this. As you can probably see through here, you can see the hard drive mount wiggling around. So now I'm going to grab the 4 screws that we had from earlier. Oh, dropped one of them. So let's grab those. So now we've got, okay, so now we got to line up the first screw. So the first one is right here. I did have a little bit of trouble here, but to be honest, if you have any more hand-eye coordination than I do, you'll probably be fine. Alright, so I got the mount screwed back in, so now we're going to screw the grounding cable in. There we go. Grounding screw is now in. So now we're going to go over to the 2 cables that are over here, and we're going to just plug these back in basically the way they came. We're going to plug this in here. We're going to plug this boy. Actually, I should probably remove this sticky stuff since I guess it's not particularly useful. And it's also going to block the entrance a little bit of the cable. Alright. I got enough so that way the connector isn't blocked. But let's stick this right back in, and alright. Cool. This is back together. We have the grounding cable and the two actual cables for the SSD now in here. The SSD bracket, what was the hard drive bracket, is now successfully secured in here. So I'm just going to put this back where I found it, which I believe was right here. And we're going to leave this be. So now that we got this here done, I'm just going to screw this back together, and we're good to go for the hard drive. Alright, let's put this back together. So we've got this. This is just going to go on. Ooh, how did this come on here? This part goes on the back, so I guess actually no, this goes more like this. Yeah, there you go. This is sliding together. We go like this, and this should all come back together properly, at least in theory. There we go. Alright, just need a little bit of a click. I'm going to start screwing the smaller screws back on the sides. And here I just start on the left side of the SmartZone, and then I go to the back, and then I go to the right side. It's nothing too special. Alright, so now that we've got the SmartZone put back together with a brand new storage device, it's time to flash the RWG software onto a USB and then boot off of that USB. There are some minor BIOS changes that are required, but I'll show you when we get to those. What we're going to do now is we're going to create a bootable USB drive that has the RWG installer on it. So, first thing you're going to want to do is run disk util list once you've plugged in your USB stick. Side note, all of the steps that I'm going to be running here are actually in a nice little post on the RGNet subreddit, which you can find the link to in the description. I'm going to be running through these steps on screen in case it's useful for you to watch it happen live. Once you've run disk util list, look for the disk that contains the USB stick that you just plugged in. In my case, this is /dev/disk4. I am now going to run disk util unmount disk4. Note that this number may change depending on what you've got plugged into your system, so just be careful and change that number. Here I'm going to run disk util unmount disk4, so that way the operating system doesn't think it can edit or scan or do things to the USB stick while we're doing things with it. Once we've unmounted the disk, we're then going to zero out some of the disk, so we're going to run sudo dd if is equal to /dev/0, and then the output is equal to /dev/r disk4. Make sure that you have the R here, and make sure that this number here lines up with the disk that you previously unmounted and found. Then we're going to type bs equals 1m and count equals 16. Since I'm running this in sudo, I'm obviously going to need to enter my user password, which I'm going to do right now. And then you have to wait for it to zero out some of the disk. Now that it's done, what we're going to do is we're going to run sudo dd if equals, and now you're going to need to know exactly what the name of the file that you have is. In my case, I have downloaded an RWG release specifically for the SmartZone. I will also provide this image to you in a GitHub repository. The link will be in the description. And I'm going to set this as the input file here. This is the name of the file, and I'm actually already in my download, so I'm already in the place where I have this file stored. And then we're going to set the output to /dev/rdisk4. This is the same one that we just zeroed out. And then bs is equal to 1m. Actually, I forgot to put the equal sign, so once I put that in, now we wait for the computer to flash the ISO to the USB stick. As you can see here, we have now successfully flashed the RWG image to the USB stick. Next, what you're going to want to do is obviously just eject the disk. So we're going to go disk util eject disk4. Now that it's ejected, you can now unplug it from your computer. And now we're going to plug it into the SmartZone and boot to the USB. Alright, so I plugged in the SmartZone, as you can see, via this power cable that I'm wiggling in the back. But what we want to do next is we want to connect the SmartZone to your computer using this console port that you see right here. This will give us access to things like the BIOS when the SmartZone first powers up. Although I guess at this point it's not actually a SmartZone. What you're going to want to do first is obviously take out this rubbery little plug that's right here that's in the console port. You can see it right here. It's just a small little piece that they use to block up the port to make sure stuff doesn't get inside it. You're going to want to just keep this to the side in a place that you can keep safe because you're going to want to put that back into the port when you're done. Next, you're going to want to get yourself a cable that looks kind of like this. So you're going to want a cable that has RJ45 on one end, which is the right end that you see that I'm wiggling right here. And then you're going to want another end, probably USB. In my case, I'm going to be connecting this to a Mac, a new Mac, that is. So I'm using USB-C. Obviously, if you're going to be connecting to something like a Windows PC, you're probably just going to end up using USB-A, but either way, you need a cable like this. You're going to want to take the RJ45 end of your cable and plug it into the console port. Then take the other end of your cable, which in my case is the USB-C end, and then you're going to plug it into your computer. Alright, now that you've got your USB stick with the RWG code flashed on it, what you're going to do is you're going to plug it into one of these two USB ports that you see underneath the console port. And once that's done, we're now going to power on the SmartZone. Just a side note, if you are using a Mac, you will need an external keyboard like this one because you will need this delete key right here. This is because for some reason, the delete key on the Mac normal keyboard does not actually register the same as this delete key here, and otherwise you cannot access the BIOS settings. Before you turn on the Smart Zone, make sure that you run this screen command here. Note that it may not be exactly TTY USB serial and then that set of letters and numbers, but do make sure that you use the exact bitrate, which is 115,200. To find the exact name of your USB serial device, you're going to want to type ls/dev/tty star and you'll find it here. Once you've got the USB plugged in, go to the backside of your Smart Zone and flip the switch to turn it on. As soon as you do that, make sure you start spamming the delete key on your keyboard. Keep spamming even once you see the Intel boot agent. Note that you may now be prompted for a password before you are allowed to enter the BIOS configuration settings. Not all smart zones will require this, but if you do need it, you will need to contact your friendly neighborhood Ruckus support person to get them to enter the password for you. I actually know the password, so I will be typing it in myself here. Now that we're in the BIOS settings, I'm going to be changing some of these. I'm going to be following the steps that I actually have in a technical document that I received from Ruckus support. First step is to go into Advanced, then scroll down to the area that says CPU configuration, hit enter. You're going to want to use your arrow keys to do this, and then you're going to want to go down to the area that says execute disable bit. You're going to want to hit enter on that, go down and enable this. You're also going to want to go to Intel virtualization and enable that as well. And now we hit escape to go back up one level. And now we're going to navigate to the boot settings and change the first boot option to be the USB that we just plugged in. And now we're going to save the changes we just made, and just to be safe, we're going to then save changes again and exit. And now the Smart Zone should boot up to the RWG installer. And as you can see, the RWG installer has now been loaded, and if you wait a second, it will automatically start to install RWG. And just wait a little bit, because it may take some time for the RWG installer to start prompting you for information. The installer will probably ask you what kind of console you are using. Just press enter because it probably detected it properly. When prompted, say yes to begin the installation. As the installer says, this process will take a few minutes. At some point, the RWG will restart. Make sure that you pull out the USB stick before it fully restarts, or else you will accidentally load the installer again. At some point, you will reach a screen where the RWG says initializing. This may take a while, so consider going to grab a drink. It has finished configuring, and now you can see some information. This includes things like the IUI, some of the ports that are here, as well as the fact that we're running FreeBSD. It also tells you what the current primary WAN configuration, so this is which interface it has chosen as the uplink port. In this case, it's IGB0, as well as the IP address and how it's going to try to get its information, so it's automatically set for DHCP. And it also shows you information on what the default LAN port is, which in this case is the last port, which is IGB3. The RWG has also automatically set up this, which is, as you can see, this is the subnet that it has chosen to use for the LAN side, as well as the DHCP addresses that it has put into a DHCP pool for you to then access if you plug in to the LAN port of this RWG. You also have the option from here to try to configure all of these things. You can configure the WAN side, the LAN side, you can also reboot, shut down, things like that. But just as a demonstration, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you me plugging in to the LAN port and getting a DHCP address from the RWG. As you can see here, I have the adapter for what I'm going to be connecting to an Ethernet cable in order to connect to the LAN port of the new RWG that we have. If I plug in the adapter with the Ethernet cable connected to the LAN port, now we just wait a second for the operating system to recognize the new adapter. And, as you can see, It has automatically discovered that this is the DNS server it should use because obviously that is the router. And if we reload this page, you can now see that I've received the first address in the DHCP block, which is what should happen because I am the first device to be given an address via DHCP by this RWG. Now that I have an IP address from the RWG, I'm just going to quickly demonstrate how you get to the administrative web user interface from your browser. What you're going to do is you're going to navigate to 192.168.5.1/admin. Make sure you put https:// at the beginning of the IP address. If you hit enter, it should now warn you with some SSL errors. Don't worry about that. That's just because we haven't set up an SSL certificate yet. But if you bypass the warning and visit, you should now see, after it loads, you now have access to the RWG's setup interface. Here you will be able to add administrators, add license keys, and things like that. So that way you can activate your copy of RWG. And that's it. I guess in a future video I will be showing you how to install the virtual smart zone onto the RWG to complete out our inception. But that's for another video. That's all I got, and I'll see you in the next one.